Well, hello everybody and welcome to Jeff's Baking Blog. Today I'm going to make some light and airy sandwich bread. So this is going to be a very simple loaf of bread made with just water, flour, yeast and salt and sesame seeds sprinkled on the top, but just as simple as that. But it's going to be light and airy, baked in a sandwich loaf tin or in a £2 loaf tin. The weight of the bread will be less than £2, but the volume, because it's light and airy, will fill the tin quite nicely. And it does take some time. You started off the night before, or let's say at least 6 to 8 hours before, by making a quick starter dough, and then the next morning or 8 hours later you mix that into the remaining ingredients to form a dough, which you then proof once for about 90 minutes, and then you shape it and leave it to rise in the tin before baking it. So that's all there is to it really, and I'll go on to the ingredients. And for the starter I have 90 grams of bread flour. That's 2/3 of a cup minus 1 tablespoon of bread flour. That's flour with at least 11 grams of protein in. So in the UK it would be bread flour. I think you can get all-purpose flour with at least 11 grams of protein, so you could use that. In the US and Canada and such like. I have 113 millilitres, half a cup minus 1.5 teaspoons of lukewarm water, and 1/4 of a gram or 1/8 of a teaspoon of instant yeast. That's for the starter. And then for the main dough I'm going to use that starter mixed into 326 grams, which is 2 cups plus 3 tablespoons of bread flour, 170 millilitres, 3/4 of a cup minus 2 teaspoons of warm water, 6.2 grams, 2 teaspoons of instant yeast, and 8 grams, 1.25 teaspoons of salt. And I should say, when I'm referring to cup measures for the flour, that's based on scooping packed flour into a 250 millilitre cup. So the first thing we need to do is to make our starter dough. Now I've actually made mine already. I have it here. I made it last night, but I'll show you how to do that. And all I'm going to do is to put my yeast into my 90 grams of flour and add my warm water, and I'm simply going to mix that around until it's fully combined. And I'm not going to worry about any lumps of flour in the mixture, because we're leaving this, as I said, overnight, and that flour will fully rehydrate or hydrate during that time. So that's our dough. I'll scrape that down. Like that, and then that's ready to be left and covered. So I'll take my cover off here and I'll put it on here. I'll leave the spoon and I'll cover that and leave that overnight basically, or for at least 8 hours. And so with that ready, which I have here, and you can see that it's aerated nicely. It's risen up quite high and then it's sunk back again, and that's fine. that's ready to use to make our dough. So we'll go on and do that now. And to make the dough, I'm going to use my Ankarsrum mixer, but you can use any stand mixer you want, or you can use do it by hand. I'm going to put my overnight starter into the bowl of my mixer. And I'm going to pour in my water, which is lukewarm, as I said, and I'm going to sprinkle over my yeast. I'm simply going to mix that together. And that's good enough like that. So then I'm going to put my flour in. I'm going to put half of the flour, or roughly half, in like that, and I'm going to sprinkle my salt over that, and I'm going to start kneading that or mixing it, and as it comes together I'll put the remaining flour in, and then I'll let it mix on a medium speed until it becomes a shaggy dough. And that's become a shaggy dough like that. So I'm going to knead that for about 8 minutes, and during that time it will all come together into a nice smooth soft dough. So my dough has now been kneading for about 8 minutes, and that's nice and smooth and soft. So I'm going to take out my attachment, scrape the excess dough off the roller, and I'm going to just leave my dough in that bowl like that, and I'm going to cover it with my lid. And I'm going to leave that to rest for 45 minutes. And after 45 minutes I'll come back and I will gently deflate it and turn it over, and then leave it for a further 45 minutes covered, and then it will be ready to shape basically. So I'll come back in 45 minutes, show you what it looks like, turn it over, and then we'll proof it for a further 45 minutes. So it's been 45 minutes and my dough has proofed a little bit, as you can see, and I'm just going to gently knock some of the air out of it like that, and then I'm going to turn it over, and I'll find my scraper is the easiest way of doing that. Like that. And I'm going to leave it again for a further 45 minutes for it to proof some more, and then I'll come back in 45 minutes and we'll go on to shape the dough and put it into our loaf tin. So it's now been a further 45 minutes and I have greased my work surface quite lightly, so I'm going to tip the dough out onto the work surface, and I'm going to try not to remove too much air from it as I do that, but it is a tacky dough still, remember. I just scrape the excess out of the bowl. And then I'm simply going to shape that without knocking too much air out of it into a log of about the same length as my £2 loaf tin, which I have greased. Just like that, and I'm going to pick it up. I'm just going to turn it over and pinch the seam together a little bit, like that. And then I'm going to put that into my loaf tin and gently press it down. And I'm going to leave that covered for between 60 and 90 minutes until it has risen above the top of the pan by at least an inch. I think it will puff up and it will become quite fluffy, and I want it to be fluffy. And at that time I will have preheated my oven to 220 degrees Celsius, 200 Celsius with a fan, 425 Fahrenheit, and I will have beaten an egg, and I forgot to mention the egg in the ingredients, but I will have beaten an egg so that I can brush over the top of the dough and sprinkle my sesame seeds over the top. And that will then be ready to bake, but I will come back and show you that before I put it into the oven. So my dough has now been in the loaf tin for about 70 minutes, and it's puffed up quite nicely. It's nice and puffy now, and it looks as though it's about to start to blister, and if it does blister, you know that's time to get it into the oven very quickly. So I've beaten an egg, and I'm just going to brush over the top of the dough very gently because I don't want to deflate it. And that's good like that. So then I'm going to take some sesame seeds and sprinkle those on the top. You don't have to do this. You can sprinkle some salt on if you want to, or nothing at all, or some everything but the bagel mix if you have some of that sort of thing. But it does give the loaf just that lovely little flavour as well when you encounter the sesame seeds while you're eating a sandwich. So I'll also put some black sesame seeds on, but fewer of those. That's just really to give an effect, but again with the flavour of the roasted black sesame. And I'm going to put that into the oven, and I'm going to bake it for about 25 minutes. You can bake it for a little bit longer, but after 25 minutes I will test it with my thermometer. I want the temperature to reach at least 88 degrees Celsius, 190 Fahrenheit. That will tell me that the bread is cooked all the way through. Now you can cook it for longer, and if you want to cook it for longer and it gets hotter than that, up to sort of 97, 98 Fahrenheit, Celsius, which would be well over 200 Fahrenheit. That will make the crust thicker if you want a thicker crust. Personally, I don't need a thick crust. So at 88 Celsius, 190 Fahrenheit, I will take mine out of the oven. I'll tip it out of the tin onto a wire rack and allow it to cool. And once it's cooled down, I'll come back and show you the result. I baked my light and airy sandwich bread for 25 minutes, and I tested the internal temperature, and it was up to just over 90 degrees Celsius. So that was higher than the 88 that I was hoping to reach. So I took it out of the oven and turned it out of its tin straight away onto a wire rack, and I left it to cool. So I've just cut it in half, and I'll show you what it looks like on the inside. So as you can see, it's actually quite light and airy and very, very soft, but baked all the way through perfectly nicely. So I'll have a taste of this piece, which is from the same loaf that I made yesterday, basically. Very, very good. It's lovely and soft. It's a very basic loaf, and I just got the hit of those sesame seeds. It's a very basic loaf, as you can see, with just water, flour, yeast and salt, but perfectly good for sandwiches and for toasting if it gets a little bit stale. But and it's quite easy to make. As I said, you can do it by hand, although it being a sticky dough, I find that using a stand mixer of some sort is actually easier to work with. So that's going to be it for this recipe. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you have, please give me the thumbs up below and click to subscribe to my YouTube channel. In the top right hand corner of the screen there will be an eye that you can click on, and that will take you to a link for the recipe, and I'll put a link below the video as well, and I'll be back with another recipe in the very near future. So until then, happy baking.